Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Worship Ministry Training Podcast. This is Alex Infiegin, your host. So thankful that you're tuning in to this podcast. If you are a new listener, I want to encourage you to dig through the episode archive list. We have 4 years worth of episodes on practical topics, ranging from theological to like how to play your guitar or how to do vocal cues. So dig through the episode list and see what topics will be of help to you in this season of your ministry. Today, I am talking with the one and only Phil Wickham about a couple of things, but primarily talking about vocal care, because if you didn't know this, Phil almost lost his voice completely and needed to change how he cared for his voice. And so we talk about how singers can care for their voices, how we can strengthen our voices, how we can find our own style and unique tone, and just even how to approach singing for church services in a way that helps the congregation sing. So lots about singing. We also talk about his new album, Living Hope, which is amazing. You should check it out, and I'll put links in the show notes. So excited to share this episode with you. Before we do that, I want to tell you about our recommended product of the month, Core Sound Pads. This is backing pads for your band. That's that ethereal, soft, fluffy, warm, atmospheric sound that sits in the mix under your band, kind of glues all the pieces together, catches you, acts like a safety net when the music dies down, and helps transitions be smooth. Amazing product by Core Sound Pads. They have multiple sounds and samples for their pads. It's just an MP3 file that you can put into any software or play right from your iPhone or iPad, or you can do that from their app, which is called Pads Live. So you can check that out in the App Store. If you decide to buy the pads from coresoundpads.com, you can use the promo code WMT Podcast at checkout, and that will save you 20%. That's our recommended product this month. Let's jump right into the episode with Phil Wickham. Hey everybody, I am here with the one and only Phil Wickham. Hey Phil, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Alex. It's good to be here.
Yeah, man. Stoked to have you. Well, Phil, I'd say just from my own personal opinion, like God has given you one of the most unique and beautiful and recognizable voices in the modern worship genre. And what our listeners may not know, though, is that a few years ago, you had a scare where you almost lost your voice completely. And so I'd love to talk with you today about the lessons you learned from that experience and how you're taking care of your voice now, and what some of the things that our listeners can do to take care of their voices and even strengthen and develop their voices as they lead their churches in song. So just for the record, like, when did you develop this vocal nodule problem and have surgery? Like, how many years ago was that now?
Man, that must have been 4 years ago, I guess around 2014. I was diagnosed with actually a polyp on my vocal cord, which is a little more, can be more intense, I guess, or depending on what kind, than a nodule. Nodule is a little more of like a callus that can develop over time and also can diminish over time. And polyps are kind of a little more iffy. Like, mine was actually hemorrhaging, which there's some blood coming out of it. And,
oh my gosh.
And yeah, it's one of those things where like they're not like for sure going to go away if you just rest your voice, you know. And I was on steroids for a month, and I didn't talk or sing for a month to see if it would start to diminish just from rest. And it actually just stayed exactly the same, but started bleeding even more.
Oh my gosh.
And so they're like, man, if you want to be back on the road anytime, we got to try surgery, but there's possibility that it might not heal properly, which could kind of diminish your ability to sing. And, you know, and that's not like hearing you have cancer or something. It's relatively like my whole world didn't like fall apart. But at the same time, this idea of like, wow, I might have to change the way I live my life and the way I do my job. And it's
kind of scary.
It affected a lot of me, of what I do and what the future might hold for me and kind of how I viewed myself. I realized pretty quick when that was like a reality that I might have to like take, you know, this giant part of my life away as far as like being on tour and leading people in worship. I realized actually pretty quick how much I depended on that, just like approval of man, just to like validate my existence, you know? Because I realized I felt depressed, I felt frustrated, I was impatient. It was going to be like a 6-month process, you know, and then it's how I provide for my family. So there's like a bit of fear and anxiety and impatience. But the biggest thing I felt was a surprising thing, which is like just feeling lost, you know, and feeling like my worth was kind of getting taken out from under my feet. And in that, though, when that kind of was stripped away, when the thing that I didn't even realize I was kind of like resting in, that like, okay, this is what makes me valuable as a human. Like God really replaced that with a much bigger truth, that, which is, it's sweet because there's so many songs about it now, like Hillsong, Who You Say I Am, and Good Father, about really choosing to believe who God says we are and what he has made us into and what he is making us into. But that's when I first really started to believe that in my life. So I'm so thankful for that time, but at the same time it was difficult taking 4 months off and being absolutely silent for 2 of the months. Thankful to God that the surgery went great, and the healing, actually, it really was miraculous. When 3 weeks after I got the surgery, the surgeon checked in with a little microscopic camera, and I remember her gasping, just saying, literally, if I wasn't the one that went in and cut this out of your vocal cord, I wouldn't believe someone even did surgery on you. I don't see any.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was just such an answer to prayer. So that was that part, which was like an amazing kind of life-giving thing, how God does that in the midst of trying things. He just brings his life and beauty. But then there's a nuts and bolts aspect of like, well, how do I keep this from not happening again?
Yeah. Now, well, first of all, like, we're so thankful that the surgery was successful, because we wouldn't have had the last 2 albums, which are both amazing. And so we're so glad that God gave you your voice back to sing and to lead people in song and to write songs for the church. And I think what you said about finding our worth in what we do, I'm pretty sure almost every listener can relate to that struggle. I completely do. It's like my wife sometimes says, like, dude, stop checking your podcast stats, because like it's an idol for you. It's like we find value in the value that we bring to other people. And there's good to that, obviously, but it can't be our identity. So it sounds like God did an amazing work in your life through this trial. Yeah.
Obviously, we want to do things that are impactful, and a lot of ways we see that they're impactful is like direct response. If we're making music for people to sing in churches, we want to open our eyes while we're leading it and people are lifting up their hands and singing it. You want to make sure. I think that, like you said, there's good to like the litmus test of like, is this doing what it's supposed to be doing? And if not, what do we tweak? But then it becomes an unhealthy thing where it's like we start to rise and fall, like our emotions, our demeanors, our countenances on our face rises and falls with like just the visible aspect of what we do. I think we're missing out on a lot of freedom that we're promised in Jesus. When we're, I just know now, when I compare myself now, like walking on a stage, whether it's to a giant audience that all bought tickets to come to a concert, or if it's like a midweek study at the church I lead at, to walk on stage, really like reminding yourself of like, wow, God, I'm so desperate for a gracious God, and he has been overwhelmingly gracious to me to give me this opportunity to point people to him. Then also like that God is completely pleased in what I have to bring, and that he's given me everything I need to accomplish what's before me. It's like there's such a freedom in that. Like I feel so much more free to do the will of God in my life when I'm believing the truth about what he says I am, where I'm taking a stage, like being like, wow, I am forgiven. I am set free. God takes joy in my songs. And so it no longer becomes about, okay, how can I create a moment? How can I rustle up some kind of emotional response where people like can kind of get on? It's no longer about me trying to make a moment happen, but it's me. And my heart has shifted to a place of saying, God, I just can't wait to bless your heart with my songs, Yeah. Not like, God, help me to do a good job, or God, I want it to be a moment, Lord, help me. It's less of this stressful thing and more of like this, man, I cannot wait to get out there and sing about you, and work in spite of me, work inside of me. There's just a freedom there. So that's a whole nother thing that I learned from it.
That's a good lyric. Work in spite of me, work inside of me.
Yeah, I get. Maybe it is.
Yeah, that's good. No, that's so encouraging, man. And I'm really glad to hear that your heart is in that spot. I want to talk a little bit just about what led to these vocal nodules, because we all sing a lot. Nobody sings probably more than you do, but we do all sing a lot. And I think we've all experienced vocal fatigue, soreness, hoarseness from time to time. For you, what were the first symptoms where you were like, dude, something's wrong and it's kind of a serious thing? And what would you say contributed to you getting to that place? Like too much coffee or too much singing or singing wrong? Like how did you get there? And then how did you kind of know something was wrong?
Well, you can't really know exactly how it got there because I didn't have a history of getting checked out by a voice therapist, But what 99% believe is that at some point, a vein in my vocal cords hemorrhaged, which means it burst and created this small little injury on my vocal cord. And I didn't rest that injury, continued to sing on it. And so it developed this like protective coating around this injury. And then that protective coating ended up weighing down one of my vocal cords. So I kind of lost control. I couldn't sing notes that I wanted to sing. And my voice was very hoarse. And so as far as how it got there, I mean, I think it was a number of things, but I know that I've implemented some very simple things. I mean, my life hasn't changed drastically as far as from before and after as far as a singer, but I've implemented some very simple thoughts and ideas into my vocal health that I know now, like I can sing 4 or 5 nights in a row, hour and a half long sets, and I'm tired by the 4th or 5th night. Like I'm like, okay, I need a couple days off, but I remember beforehand, like even after one night, sometimes I would get off stage and my voice would sound so hoarse, And so the things I've implemented is this, it's like, it's being aware of a few things. And so much of it doesn't have to do with anything while you're on stage. A lot of it is all the stuff you're doing when you're off stage. I love to talk and hang out, love to say hi to people, meet new people when I'm traveling, but I was talking so much during the day, and I would get on plane flights and talk where the dB level you don't realize from the engines in the air is you're like in a 92, 93 dB level situation just by sitting in an airplane. And so if you want to talk over that, you don't realize it, but you're talking at a much elevated level, or a loud restaurant or the lobby of a concert or wherever like the noise is elevated and you're not realizing that you're pushing your voice more than you should. It's like, if you think of it as like being like a professional runner, and okay, I've got to do an hour-long race tonight, but then all of a sudden there were reasons for you to like do a 5-mile jog here and a 2-mile jog there and a 3-mile jog there. You didn't realize it, but you'd already jogged 10 miles, and now you're at your official race, but you've tired your whole voice out, And that jogging throughout the day is equivalent to singers throughout the day, like talking on an airplane and doing a 2-hour-long sound check where you're singing the whole time. And so much of it is just keeping your mouth shut and choosing to put headphones on and listen to music instead of talking with your friends on an airplane, or realizing, hey, this is a loud situation right now. There's been many times where I've had to like bow out of a really fun thing that like the rest of the whole crew is doing, but I'm like, man, I know if we all go to Top Golf right now, I'll be shouting. You know what I mean? Or I know if we were on a basketball court, I'll be yelling. Everything will be elevated, and I'll get tired. So I have to say no to a lot of stuff. And so one of it is just being so careful on the nights you have to sing during that day. Is just like keeping your mouth shut, and then drinking a lot of water. And honestly, even those 2 things make such a giant difference. And I would say the third thing is a quick warm up before every time you sing, like before sound check and before you go on stage. I have an 11-minute warm-up that my voice doctor made for me. And it's 11 minutes. It's pretty easy. I do it on the car on the way to church when I'm leading at church. Warming up, resting your voice throughout the day, and then getting good rest at night and drinking a lot of water. It's like, seems so simple. But when I think to how I treated my voice before this, man, I was just
destroying it.
Yeah. And if there's one more thing for me personally, I wouldn't say everybody falls in this category, and I think this falls into kind of what I learned through that time too, is like when I would get on stage before the surgery, and ever since I was in high school, like I always felt this need to like, okay, I got to prove to people that I deserve to be here. Like I got to prove that it's worth their Friday night that they came out, and so I would be like from beat one, just like 100% singing, singing as hard as I could, as much as and that's super fatiguing to your voice too. And also, when you listen back to recording of that, it's like
doesn't sound that great.
Yeah, you realize, well, I should just chill out, And so, yeah, that's a long answer, but those 5 things is to completely revolutionize my voice health.
That's amazing. I sing a lot here as well at our church. We have 3 different service slots, and the Sunday morning slot has 3 services of its own. And so one thing that I've started to do is during our rehearsal, we run through the songs twice before, this is Sunday morning, before the 3 morning services. So I'm going to sing basically the same set 5 times in a row, right? So what I do is the first run through, I sing it, but the second run through, I sing just enough of the phrases for the band to know where we're at in the song. And I just back off the mic and don't sing the rest of the phrase. And that allows the band to listen to each other better. It rests my voice, and it just kind of gives me one set less that I have to sing. So that might be something that people listening could try to save their voice. And also, like you said, that's a huge tip. Just, we don't need to blow out our voices on the first note of the first song. You know, it's like we should be using our dynamic range anyway. So
100%. Yeah. Even on our tracks, we have a track we can mute and unmute of my voice singing every song.
Oh, nice.
So if we ever need to rehearse anything or like do a sound check, like we can just unmute that track and I don't have to sing, you know, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's rad. That's a good hack. So speaking of like using our voice as well during services and not, you know, using dynamic range and all that, what is the best advice that you could give to a vocalist on how to strengthen their voice? So like you talked about warming up, but not just strengthen their voice, but shape their own unique singing tone and style. Like what would you tell a worship leader, you know, who's trying to copy you or copy Matt Redman or, you know, whatever, because you kind of hear that sometimes. You're like, man, they're trying really hard to be so-and-so. What would you tell a vocalist, like how to find their own tone, how to develop their own style, and then how to strengthen their voice, like maybe even strengthen and increase their range? Any tips on that?
Well, I know that growing up, there were several singers that I just absolutely tried to copy, you know? Mm-hmm. In some senses, it was like a little bit silly, a little bit funny, because people would be like, wow, you're trying to totally be this guy or that guy. But a large part of that is helping me discover my own voice, you know? For me, I think so much of it is just the more you sing, the more I think you discover your own voice and where your own voice sits in songs and all that. And then the more you sing in front of people, for me, I think a lot of trying to emulate other people. I mean, one was just being a fan of people, but I think another one was like a lack of confidence, you know, of like I need to do something special with my voice, or I need to make it sound like this guy or that guy, or you know. But I think the more we do it, the more we get on stage and get comfortable with our own voice. I just know for me, you can tell when someone is putting on a mask, so to speak, as a worship leader. You know, you can just, in their voice, you can tell when someone's trying to over stylize. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's a distracting thing. And a part of it, I think, is just you mature as a vocalist and just mature as a person to realize, man, like my voice works, you know? Yeah. It took me a while to realize how much power there is when we are just being us on stage. You know, I used to think I needed to say the things on stage and lead the same way and sing a certain way, because that's the way you lead worship, you know, that I need to say this phrase. And the older you get and the more you do it, you realize, man, like I want to lead out of my own personality and what God has given me, and not say the same things that I've heard other people say before songs, but maybe God has given me a 20-second little moment of inspiration to speak out, or a verse that I've never heard anybody else say before we sing, you know, before we sing Oceans, you know. So God has given you a verse that's like, man, it'd be amazing to speak this over the congregation before we sing this song. And you start to just find your own voice. And so much of that, I think, is really great to try to emulate singers that you think are awesome, because it helps you find your own voice and learn how to use your own voice. But then there's a point where you just got to kind of break off and be like, well, who am I? And I want to be confident in that and lead out of that.
Right. That's so good. Like the emulation period is like training wheels until you get some bearings for, you know, this is who I am. And one of the things for singing in terms of leading worship is like, it's easy to like try to do all these fancy runs and do all these really cool, amazing things. But a lot of the time that can actually kind of pull people's attention away from Jesus and onto this amazing vocalist. And it's like, you know, sometimes right down the middle of the road is the sweet spot. And like, if people watch you on like the Harvest live stream, they're going to see a different vocal style than if they watch you at a concert. You know what I mean? Because not that you're changing too much, but when you're leading a church service, you're not going to be doing these crazy, like unique vocal things that you would do at your concert. At least I think that's true. Is that true?
Well, I would say the same vocal style. I would it's probably just simplified notes, you know?
That's what I mean. Yeah.
But at the
That's what I
same
mean.
time, like I would lead Living Hope the same way at a concert as I would at church, you know?
Yeah.
If a song is meant for people to sing along to, there's just a sweet spot for that, you know? It's not like, okay, it's a concert, so now I'm going to like draw more attention to myself on that song, you know? It's more just like, no, this song is a moment for people to respond to Jesus. I just want to sing the melody and get out of the way so people can do it with me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Simplified notes. That's a good way to put it. So you mentioned Living Hope, which I would love to talk with you about. That's your new album, beautiful album. I remember talking to Gene Kim, who was your monitor engineer. Or maybe he still is, but he said that he was like, I'm so excited about Phil's new album because he's writing it for the church. He's trying to write songs that people could play in any size church with any accompaniment and it will work. And I feel like, you know, most of the songs on the album really hit that spot. So can we talk a little bit about the album? Like, what was your goal going into writing Living Hope? What did you want it to be? And maybe how did you want it to be different from your past albums?
Well, I think how this record is different is that it was probably the least goal-oriented record. And in a way, it was probably the most freeing. It was a very natural progression. About 2 years ago, I started leading fairly regularly at a church, at Harvest Christian Fellowship. And I found myself just filtering a lot of what I was writing through. Hey, would we sing this at Harvest? Or you think this melody would work at Harvest? Or should it be a little more simple? What songs are we missing at Harvest that we need more of? And no one was asking me to do that, you know. I just found myself starting to write for this community that I was getting closer and closer to and more a part of. And then all of a sudden, I had a list of 20, 25, 30 songs that I had written directly and indirectly to sing at church. And all of a sudden I realized, man, this is my heart right now. And so I think it was more, instead of the goal and then chasing after the goal, it was like, trying to serve the local church, then realizing, hey, I think this record's done, you know, as far as being written. So yeah, it was, I don't know if that answers your question, but it wasn't a big goal in mind. It was just like a very natural progression of what was happening in my life.
Yeah, you were writing to serve the people that you were called to serve. And I had this thought, like, which is so cool, Phil, because people, they could call you a superstar, you know, they could call you celebrity worship leader. But I've just been thinking a lot lately, like the call of a worship leader is to be a servant, not a superstar. And I think these songs and the way that they were birthed just show that that's your heart. Your heart is to serve the local church that you're serving at, and then through that serve the global church. And there's also something else I wanted to highlight in what you said. You had mentioned like you had written 25, 30, maybe more songs, and, you know, 10 or 12 make it to the record. And just for the songwriters listening, that seems to be the kind of the norm. Like when I've talked to Keith Getty or Paul Balash or like Andy Rossi, or they all say the same thing. They say, for every album, you're going to write 10 times the songs that make it on the album. And I think that's just an encouragement for the listeners to kind of peek back behind the curtain and go, oh, not every song Phil Wickham writes makes it on an album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. It's like, if you're a songwriter, then it's just a part of what you do, you know, and you're singing songs and situations. And as you respond emotionally to movies and music and Bible studies and books and relationships, you don't just respond emotionally, but you start singing the songs in it all. I think for us, our true songwriter, writing the song is enough of the end result. Like, that's kind of probably how it was for me. Like, even if some reason I lost my voice and I knew I'm never going to make a record again, I'd still be writing songs, because I'm not writing songs first and foremost even to be heard. I'm writing songs because I love writing songs, and it's the way I try to bless God's heart. And I'm so thankful that God has seen it fit to give me an outlet where quite a few people can get blessed, and churches can even get new vocabulary to sing through these songs I write in my bedroom or my office at home. It's like, what an honor and a privilege. But yeah, like if you're a songwriter, I probably always have 5 or 6 or 7 ideas stewing around, and you just never know when the right verses are going to come along or the right chorus is going to fall in your lap. Just like even this morning, I had these 2 lines forever. Oh God of miracles, nothing is impossible for you. You resurrect my soul. You can take the old and make it new. Just like this kind of big, you're the God who never fails kind of thing. And I never knew what it was for. And now a friend of mine is going through a super, super trying time. And I just, as I was praying and thinking on him, the rest of the song just spilt out, and I probably had that chorus for a year and a half. And so now it's like, it just was for such a time as this, and so I would say to all you songwriters, write. Don't think every song should be introduced to your church. Make sure you have like kind of a hierarchy of people you can bounce stuff off of. From theology, are you saying all the right stuff that really connects people with the truth of the gospel and God's word? To like real hookiness and melody, is there someone in your life that can speak into that, and guys that are seasoned to say like, hey, like there's something really special when you went that direction. The rest of the song kind of lost me, but I think you should scrap everything. But that second verse, man, write a song around that whole second, whatever it is. I think it's so important to have guys that speak in your life and you really listen, and you don't just like hold everything with a tight fist, but it's like an open hand of like, man, this is just to serve. So let's make it the best as possible.
That's rad. As we wrap it up, what songs should worship leaders consider introducing to their churches? I have a couple of my own, but I'll let you go first.
Well, I'll make it quick answers, but the song Living Hope, definitely on my top 3 favorite songs I've ever written. I think I've got 9 records out now, and that's a lot of songs to write. But there's, out of all those songs, there's only a few that are, I call them moment songs. Like it's like an atmosphere changing moment. And Living Hope is probably the first one since This Is Amazing Grace where it's like, well, this is something bigger that's happening here than just people listening to the record and coming and knowing the song, but it seems like it's connecting on a bigger level. So Living Hope, great things. We're actually leading it this weekend at Harvest. That was written to be just to add one more song to the list of upbeat openers for the set list, because those are so hard to find. So Great Things is working so well. Anthem at Harvest, I love singing Anthem. Christ is Risen is probably the one that the church sings the loudest, man. Maybe those 4 are the ones that have really, really connected.
Yeah, we've introduced Great Things. That is a hit. People love it. So worship leaders should definitely check out Great Things. And then How Great Is Your Love we did last week.
Oh, right. That
was really
too.
good. Yeah, that's really good. And then Living Hope is epic. So Living Hope is like an Oh Praise the Name, Anastasis type song that's just like a big hymn that is just so compelling. So people should check those 3 or 4 out that we've mentioned. So Phil, any final words for the listeners today?
Man, just give yourself time to fall more and more in love with Jesus, And I'm saying that because I've been challenged to do this too. I was really struck with this story of Martha and Mary, where Jesus and some disciples come into the house of Martha and Mary. And Martha is just so doing all the right things. She's cooking, she's getting the house in order, she's feeding everybody, she's serving, she's making it a place everybody wants to be. She is so busying herself with serving. And she comes in, just a hot mess, and does some things that are pretty intense. She kind of rebukes Jesus a little bit. She calls Jesus out, like, Jesus, like, why aren't you telling Mary she needs to get up and do this? She's talking to God, saying, you need to do this, And so she's rebuking Jesus, and she's humiliating her sister in front of all these men that are in her house, because I think a lot of people, especially type A people, when they come into a situation like that, they would point at Martha saying, wow, Martha's definitely like doing the right thing here. She is serving, she is spending herself, she is sacrificing her own comfort for everybody else. But Jesus turns and says her name twice, which is very sweet in my mind. Says, Martha, Martha, like there are many things that you are doing. There's many things that can be done here, but Mary has chosen the one thing. But there's one thing that is needed, and Mary has chosen it. And Mary's just sitting there listening to Jesus, enjoying his presence. And man, for worship leaders now, for anybody nowadays, but man, for worship leaders, I mean, getting a set list together, and I'm sure there's so many married people keeping their marriages together, and married people with kids that are keeping their kids alive, and then pleasing senior pastors, and then getting back to people that are writing in about it's not loud enough, it's too loud, and then Instagram, and trying to feel as hip as possible on stage, and then it's just so much to deal with. But Jesus said, but one thing is needed, and Mary's chosen it, and she is not doing anything other than letting herself enjoy the presence of Jesus, And that story really, really hit me in a big way recently, because I realized how busy my life is between 4 kids and marriage and life and travel and songwriting and doing so many things that all have so much beauty and goodness in them. Mm-hmm. But one thing is needed. And I believe you could even further say one thing is needed to bring the most beauty out of everything else. That's to make it a priority to be quiet and to listen to God and to give him a moment where you say, this is your time and this is our time, Jesus, me and you. Not just even to check the box of reading the scripture, not to check the box of praying. Okay, I prayed for everybody I want to pray for, or I read my chapter today, but I'm going to take a walk around the block. I'm going to say, God, speak to me. And then I'm not going to say anything. And I'm just going to do that. I'm going to put it on my calendar instead of hanging out with my friend, instead of going golfing, instead of something else. I'm going to put on my calendar 30 minutes for Jesus every week, And so that's been something I've been challenging myself with. It's crazy how simple it is. I mean, that's Sunday school Christianity, but it is so quickly lost in today's culture. And it is so life-giving to me as a dad, as a husband, as a songwriter, as a worship leader. Jesus himself said this one thing is needed. And I'm realizing, man, I'm not cultivating the one thing that is needed enough in my life. So that would be my encouragement to all the worship leaders out there.
Man, that's huge. Thank you so much. Phil, thanks for your time. I'm going to link all your links in the show notes and to the new album, to your website, to your socials and stuff. But thank you for the time. Thank you for the wisdom. And thanks for your heart and for just giving the church great songs.
I appreciate you having me on. God bless you and all you listeners out there, man. Just keep going for it and serving. God sees your hearts. Thanks so much for what you do.
All right, well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Phil, for your wisdom. I want to encourage you guys, definitely check out Phil's new album, Living Hope. Tons of great congregational songs. Consider introducing some of those songs to your church and be blessed by the music that he is writing for God's people. Also, check out Core Sound Pads at coresoundpads.com and use WMT Podcast at checkout to save 20% on your purchase and get that great atmospheric sounding pad sound. And that's all for this month. I will see you guys next month for another helpful episode.